So to begin with, we will talk a little bit about who GWO is, who our members are. Then we'll talk about why training standards exist, why they were created in the first place. Thirdly, we will talk about how the GWO certification framework operates. And the fourth agenda item will be WINDA, the Wind Industry Training Database, which is operated by GWO, and it's where certificates are maintained. And after I've gone through those basics, I'll take a few questions if you have them. And like I said, please put them in the question box, and I'll answer as many of them as I can. So to begin with, who are GWO? We are a non-profit members organization. We're owned by the companies you see on the screen. These are globally leading wind energy manufacturers and owners of wind turbines. We were created in 2012. The first basic safety training standard was launched in 2012, and 4 or 5 years afterwards, a further standard, the basic technical training standard, was added to the portfolio. Last year, 2 further standards were launched. Those are enhanced first aid and advanced rescue training. And this year, a blade repair training standard will be added as well. The reason that training standards exist is largely for the purposes of recognition. Employers were looking for a way to validate the skills that their employees had, and in many different countries, in many jurisdictions, there was a challenge for them to accept a training. For example, you see on the screen a picture of a training that's working at height, but without any context, it's difficult to see if it's specific to a wind energy environment. So that being the case, the members of GWO created a framework to design their own standards because they recognized there were similarities between what they were doing and what existed in the market, and that they wanted to align that with their own needs and have something that they could all recognize and move forward with. GWO standards consist of modules, and we get a lot of questions from technicians and from various people within the wind energy industry about what types of training they have to have. We produced this graphic here to give a straightforward explanation about how the modules in our standards are viewed by the members, because essentially these are employer-led trainings, so they recommend these trainings to be carried out by the technicians that they have working for them. So you'll see in the first and second column, these are recommended core training modules of safety and technical training modules. And in the column on the right-hand side, you'll see that these are task-specific modules, and those focus more on the skills and work that individuals are going to be carrying out in more unique situations. So sea survival would be the most obvious. It's task specific because it's only relevant to a technician who's going to be working in an offshore environment. I'd just like to go into a bit of detail about how GWO creates a standard. So working groups are created within GWO as a result of the collaboration between the members. So the members will identify risks and safety issues in the activities that workers are involved in a turbine environment, and they'll collaborate to attempt to standardize the work that's going on and ensure that everybody is trained to a minimum standard. So working groups are formed with subject matter experts. So if you imagine the funnel here as the working group itself, we will include within that process injury statistics, risk data, and existing training programs that are already in operation amongst the membership. So here, for example, we have Vestas Service D and Siemens 1 to 4. This information is all put into the pot together, and the result will be a standard that's created and agreed amongst the membership. So here the GWO Basic Technical Training Standard was created and launched in 2017 by combining all of those efforts. And now there are around about 7,000 technicians who are certified to that standard. So I would like to talk a little bit now about how the certification framework operates. So you can broadly group it into three parts of a circle. Point one, the standards are agreed and published. So this is all led entirely by the employers who are the members of GWO. They are the legal duty holders, and they have an obligation to protect their workers and to make sure that they're safe from harm in the workplace. By agreeing and publishing standards, they commit to using the training standards. And this moves us on to point two in the cycle, which means that training providers using that commitment now have a reason themselves to invest in developing courses and becoming certified themselves to deliver GWO training. The certification process involves an audit of a training facility by a certification body, and then the training provider is given license to train according to the standards and to upload records into WINDA. So that brings us on to point three, which is that the WINDA database, which is where all of the GWO records are kept, is the source of all of the training records, which GWO members can then review and accept as a quality standard of training, so that they won't then retrain those individuals using an existing training program, because the standard has essentially replaced what they were using before. So WINDA is the wind industry records database that we administer, which is where all GWO training records are stored. It's an important solution because of the fact that it allows employers at one end to validate the certificates of workers. It allows training providers to complete their part of the process by uploading those records into the database, and the individual worker themselves has a unique WINDA ID, which I've just circled there on the screen. This is actually the CEO of Global Wind Organization, Jakob Blauholst. He has his own WINDA ID, as do I. We've all taken courses. This ID is what we as an employee would give to, or if we were a contractor, we would give this ID to our prospective employer. They would validate the certificate. They would see that in this instance, Jakob has a first aid, a manual handling, and a fire awareness certificate. And if the employer, if those are the trainings that the employer wants, then great, they can move Jakob on to the next piece of training. Perhaps he needs to do a sea survival training to go on an offshore installation. It's all about transparency. It's all about Jakob having the record in his own ownership. So if he moves to another employer after a few months, these training certificates, in the case of the basic safety training, are valid for 2 years before he has to have them refreshed. So it gives transparency and a recognition of the competence of the worker. And that's something that is really valuable to employers, and it allows workers to be much more mobile with their skills. So training providers, this is just a little slide here that explains a bit about the extent of GWO training now around the world. There are 284 sites, GWO certified sites around the world. As you can see, there is a concentration of them in Europe. That's historically because of GWO establishing in Europe first, but it is growing around the world. And we're now seeing much faster growth in the US, in China, Latin America, India. And in terms of the numbers of inquiries that we receive from organizations that would like to become GWO certified, we expect that to continue growing. There were more than 60 new sites in various countries around the world just in 2018. So it's growing at a speed of around about 15% per year in terms of the numbers of sites. And that in itself is a product of the commitment from the industry in the standards. And this sort of brings me towards the end of the presentation. The standards are created for the industry, by the industry. Here you have some endorsements, some comments from 3 people. These guys are on our steering committee, and they're involved in driving the strategy and moving GWO forwards. And with their commitment, this encourages training providers in countries where wind energy projects are being developed to invest in GWO standard courses, because it delivers a minimum standard of safety training and technical training which is recognizable and appropriate to a wind energy environment. And it's proven itself to be viable and useful to employers. It's now available in, I think, 38 countries in the world. So it's likely to continue growing, at least at current rates. And we're always interested to help and support and facilitate the growth of GWO training around the world.
We help create safety for a lot of people. So these are live human beings that go to work every day, helping us to produce clean energy at cheap prices. They are exposed to some risks, and we need to do everything we can to make sure that these guys are safer.
The key benefit for us as an organization being part of GWO is that we assure that our people out in the field are trained so they can work safely.
The safety of the technicians has always been paramount for me, and I believe that GWO goes a long way in achieving that.
If a new worker is going to come to my facility with a GWO certificate, then I know that this person has absolutely the best training he could receive.
GWO training curriculums are based on risk assessments.
It looks at what are the risks and therefore what are the mitigations, and how do we train people so they are competent to mitigate that risk.
If we're working with common standards, then we're also able to compare apples with apples in terms of the training providers that we work with and the training they're delivering. So that gives us a lot of opportunity to reduce our costs. Every day of duplicate training that we take out is a day of time saved. So to have something you can take off the shelf and you can apply actually saves a lot of time and effort.
The standards have delivered value, they're accepted by the industry, and they will continue to deliver value.
Working in the wind industry, you meet a lot of people who feel that they're part of a bigger story. That's even more true when we talk about safety and wind. So you're both helping to save the environment from climate change, you're also saving lives on a daily basis. I mean, what's not to like?